We know MLK, we know Malcolm X, we know Rosa Parks, and we know the iconic Shirley Chisholm. But who are some of the unsung black heroes that we know nothing about? Well, join me this Black History Month as we walk through 28 days learning about 28 who should be iconic but are unsung black heroes. Hello everyone. I am Quentin R. Jiles, your host of The Q with Q, and welcome to another edition of Unsung Black Heroes. Every day this month, Black History Month 2021, I'm going to introduce heroes who have influenced not only the African American community, but the world at large. In this video, I will highlight the first black woman member of a presidential cabinet. We'll also walk through some of her many accomplishments. Patricia Roberts Harris. 2021 marked the United States' first Black and South Asian VP, Madam VP Kamala Harris. Today, we will recognize one of the great women who paved the way for Black women in the U.S. government. Ms. Patricia Roberts Harris was the first African-American woman to serve in a presidential cabinet, U.S. ambassador, dean of a law school, and a director of a large U.S. company. Patricia Roberts Harris was born in 1924 in a rural manufacturing town called Mattoon in East Central Illinois during the Great Depression. When Harris was a kid, African American women ranked lowest in the economic scale among men and women, black and white, according to the historian Rosalind Taborg Penn. Harris was able to focus and achieve. She was an excellent student despite the additional turmoil of World War II. Harris applied and received 5 college scholarships. Okay, for the kids listening out there, that's what we need. Get that scholarships because that student loan is not fun paying back. Take it from me. And she ultimately accepted a scholarship from Howard University, left Mattoon, and went off on an expedition of education. Now, Harris studied with other black scholars at Howard University in Washington, D.C., one of the many historically black colleges and universities, or HBCUs, in the United States. Pre-Civil War abolitionists saw the need for higher education for formerly enslaved people. They saw how hard it would be for black people to earn a living wage in the face of prejudice. The majority of these schools were established after the Civil War. Since then, HBCUs honored the rich history of higher education and served students from all racial backgrounds. In 1945, Harris graduated from Howard, summa cum laude. For a time, she studied at the University of Chicago, but then returned to D.C. to be closer to the battle for civil rights. Harris got her graduate degree at American University while also serving as assistant director for the American Council of Human Rights. In Washington, other black women were making history politically. In 1952, Charlotta Bass ran for U.S. Vice President as the Progressive Party nominee, becoming the first black woman to run for national office. That's from the Black Woman Suffrage DPLA timeline. Could this have inspired Harris to work in government? For the time being, Harris invested more into black college students as the first executive director of the national headquarters of Delta Sigma Theta sorority from 1954 to 1960. From their website, the sorority is made up of, quote, students who wanted to use their collective strength to promote academic excellence and to provide assistance to those in need. This and other black sororities still serve the community, fight for civil rights, and provide professional and personal connections for their sisters. Harris added more lines to her resume in 1960, graduating from the law school at George Washington University, and was admitted to the District of Columbia Bar. So sis was a lawyer. And then Harris got her first taste of government business as she joined the criminal division of the U.S. Department of Justice. Her hard work and dedication was honored by John F. Kennedy, who appointed Harris to co-chair the National Women's Committee for Civil Rights. This organization saw over 100 women's groups throughout the nation. Harris also worked with the National Capital Area Civil Liberties Union in 1963 to 1965, which used legal action to address free speech, equal rights, and other civil liberties, as well as became an associate dean of students and lecturer in law at Howard University in '63. Now let's take a wider look at the civil rights movement and that DPLA timeline. We see that in 1965, Mississippi sharecropper Fannie Lou Hamer, which we'll be doing a more extensive video on her, so make sure you stay tuned for the rest of this series, attempted to register to vote. Hamer was evicted from her home and faced routine violence and threats. Though she was eventually able to vote successfully, she became the victim of repeated and serious violent harassment and intimidation. In the face of this, Hamer begins a citizenship education program in Sunflower County, Mississippi. And then, of course, in 1965, the year Martin Luther King Jr. and John Lewis and so many others marched across the Edmund Pettus Bridge for voting rights, they were being met with armed police officers and fire hoses. The physical demonstrations in the South and other parts of the country were at long last going to affect legislation change in Washington. The Voting Rights Act of 1965 is passed, prohibiting state and local efforts to prevent black men and women from exercising their right to vote as laid out in the 15th and the 19th Amendments. The bill represented a victory for black women who had been working for more than a century to win and ensure the vote for black women and men. That same year, President Lyndon B. Johnson appointed Patricia Roberts Harris to be the first African-American woman U.S. ambassador from 1965 to 1967. When asked about this, Harris responded with mixed feelings. She said, quote, "I feel deeply proud and grateful this president chose me to knock down this barrier, but also a little sad about being the first Negro woman because it implies we were not considered before." Ms. Harris had something special about her. She continued to be the first in many arenas. In academia in 1969, becoming the first African-American dean of a U.S. law school at Howard University. In 1971, when she became director of IBM, she was the first African-American woman to serve as director of a major United States company. And in 1977, Patricia Roberts Harris appointed to be Secretary of State of Housing and Urban Development and Secretary of Health Education by President Jimmy Carter, becoming the first black woman to be a part of a presidential cabinet. It took over 200 years, but the U.S. government finally recognized the talent and ambition of black women. Since she was appointed as a member of the cabinet, Patricia was 13th in line to the presidency, the first African-American woman to be in that line, but she would not be the last. Harris was one of two black people in the presidential cabinet for both of President Carter's terms. During her appointment hearing, Democratic Senator from Wisconsin, William Proxmire, questioned Ms. Harris as to whether she would be able to serve the people who needed these housing and economic development services. The National Museum of American Diplomacy recorded Sis's response. Quote, "Senator, I am one of them. You do not seem to understand who I am. I am a black woman, the daughter of a dining car waiter, a black woman who could not buy a house 8 years ago in parts of the District of Columbia. I didn't start out as a member of a prestigious law firm, but as a woman who needed a scholarship to go to school. If you think I have forgotten that, you are wrong. If my life has any meaning at all, it is that those who start out as outcasts may end up being a part of the system." Poetry snaps. Later on, Congress established a separate Department of Education, and President Carter put Harris as the head of the Department of Health and Human Services. Harris tried her own hand at political leadership running for mayor of D.C., but ended up losing that campaign. But she continued to educate young people in a new capacity as a law professor at George Washington University in 1981. This woman did all the things: law, education, civil rights groups, a businesswoman, an ambassador, and then a cabinet secretary. Patricia Roberts Harris was committed to her own education and to the building up of other young black people. She studied the law in order to address civil rights concerns, and she also was making calls from the booth, overseeing civil rights groups, and finally heading up an entire department. Harris accomplished many things in many areas. She used her education, she taught young people, she faced systemic racism in the courtroom, she guided an entire federal department to help the unhoused. Harris brought a unique but powerful set of different passions and skills to the civil rights movement. So my question to you is, what skills do you bring to the social justice table? What are the passions that you have? What are you going to do to help the marginalized? Please comment down below on how you plan to engage in the crucial work of social change. And stay tuned for more Unsung Black Heroes. Please give this video a thumbs up if you learned a little something, subscribe, and hit the post notification bell so that you are always first in the queue. Now let's take a wider look. as well as became the co-chair of the National Women's Committee of the first Black woman member of a presidential candidate. Every day for the month of